had the Oxen Road one. And I actually found the Trawden one quite informative. And a lot of what I'm going to say tonight is affected by the things that I found out that day. I spoke to one of them for an hour, and he was willing to talk, unlike a couple of those women who were brilliant at not telling you anything. There are wonders up there, and you know this, because it's our motto. And between April and July, there are absolute wonders up there. This is a much more interesting place than the Yorkshire Dales National Park. You can walk all day in the Dales Park and not hear a curlew. And I have done that quite recently. Didn't hear a curlew or see or a lapwing. Didn't see one, of course, either. Up there, you are mobbed by the wildlife. A couple of days ago, I went up we live below Trawden, I went up there, and the number of curlews was sort of, in some ways, quite frightening. It was like Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. There were really serious numbers of them, like I've not seen there in the 5 years we've lived there. Sort of 2 or 3 times as many as there are usually. So there is very great wildlife up there. It's a great place. It's not just a lousy bit of grass and heather. It's much, much better than that. And that's an enormous flock of lapwings that Kate Hazelgrave took that photograph. Most people who live in Britain have seen one lapwing or no lapwings. And you can go up there and see an enormous flock. Huge numbers of curlews. That's Kate's photograph. And that's the golden plover. The golden plover is kind of the rarest of the waders are up there. They're the ones that go beep, 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 quite monotonously. They sometimes do a little bit longer than that, but that's the golden plovers. Lovely birds. They do better up there than anywhere else in the UK. Nowhere in the north of England or Scotland is better for the golden plover than Walshaw Moor. And then I tend not to walk around up there off the Pennine Way really, between now and the birds going. But once they've gone, it's a different sort of wonderland up there. And you can go up there, and many of you will do. You can go up there, have a proper adventure, be back in home in time for tea, and you'll probably be all right. If you're off piste, well, you know this, because you're from Yorkshire. The ground is quite difficult. If you're on the heather, you're quite safe. As soon as you're on the grass, then it can be quite difficult and dangerous. That tusky stuff is diabolical, and I've been in more trouble really on Walshaw Moor than I have in my Scottish mountaineering experience. So I've climbed nearly all the Munros. I'm about 30 short of Scottish Munros. They're sort of easier than some places on Walshaw Moor. It can be very difficult underfoot, especially if you've got an Airedale Terrier, which we do. So this is Bob Bursons. He's a peat expert. You might have met him. He would not describe himself as a peat expert. What he really thinks he is a gamekeeper expert. So Bob's quite radical. That's Bob standing under the field of the mosses, where there's still more or less a turbine. And that's that great expanse of peat. And of course, that open expanse of peat should be covered up and regraded. You probably have thought about this more than I have. There aren't that many places just as bad as that on the moor. And there are quite a lot of places where there's deep peat and it's covered in heather and until you put the probe in. I carry a 3-metre avalanche probe. Until you put the probe in, I never know how far it's going to go. I don't know if it's going to go in 3 inches or the whole way down. It's always a bit of a surprise. You never really know till you probe it. And you can't tell by the vegetation. So there are places where there's an active blanket bog starting over by Bedlam Farm. It's eating the path. But the peat there is really shallow. So there's a terrific active bog, and it's sort of happening for free. In a place where there's never been a bog before because there isn't any peat. So it's all quite complicated. You can't judge the peat depth by the vegetation, really at all. And rock climbers like the Ravenstone, but little short problems bouldering, The 20th hardest rock climb in Britain is on the other side, on the Widdop side of that thing. So it's been done not been done very often. It waited 5 years for a repeat. I think that's one of the loveliest places up there, and it's got the turbine really right on it, duststones. And it's a magnet for the people who do walk on the places they head for. You go there with your children, and you have a picnic, and you scout around the walls. It's a great place. And then Christian Goddard took that. He wrote the guidebooks. Christopher Goddard took that. It can be quite sort of challenging and arctic. He was running across that on his way to White Swan. And that's Top Williams. So it's sort of a great place. What's going to happen on this? Here we go. And it's ringed by these mill towns. And these mill towns are reinventing themselves quite slowly or quite fast in some cases. So Hebden Bridge has reinvented itself in a sort of quite amazing way. Haworth has completely reinvented itself, I think. Where we are now, Trawden is a place that the community is kind of making it happen. And there are places where it's much tougher, like Nelson and Burnley. But it's there more, it's everyone's more. 18 kilometres, so you can do a day's walk, catch a train to Burnley, walk across to Devon, maybe get a bus back or a train, and you've had your adventure. And then this wind farm will kind of block all of that. And it is big. So Ovingdon Moor, which we think of as quite a good wind farm in some ways, is tiny, absolutely tiny. Half the height. They're quite close together on Ovingdon Moor, and this thing is enormous. So as you know, this is one of the most protected bits of land in the UK. So in a way, it's more protected than a national park. So I don't think anyone would try to do this in a national park, but the law should protect Walshaw Moor. It's an SPA for the birds, and it's an SAC for the habitat, which is the peat and the acid grassland. Those laws are international laws, and we'll come back to them. And it should not be possible to jiggle them about and get a wind farm built up there. But they're going to have a go. Here is the enemy. Does anyone else have a photograph? Has anyone else got a photograph of Richard Branson? No? That is the only excellent photograph of Richard Branson. And I'm not expecting ever to meet him. I think I've been at 2 degrees of separation. I've met someone who's met him, who shook his hand. But that's as close as I'll ever get to him. And of course, he did wreck the moor when he bought it in 2002, which is what his rather glorious stones RB 2002. He set about doing to the moor sort of what he'd done at Boundary Mill. So he had a lot of good fortune at Boundary Mill because a motorway got built up to it. It's at the end of a motorway. So it's a terrific site, but kind of public money has helped to make his fortune because we paid for the motorway. And then somehow on Walshaw Moor, he wanted to make it more than it was. So Lord Savile, about whom very few people have a bad word to say, I don't know him, some of you may have done. Lord Savile had it as a sort of quite slow grouse moor, a bit sort of aristocratic grouse moor. And then Richard Bannister wanted to multiply the number of grouse on Walshaw Moor by a factor of 12. So for every 2 that Lord Savile was glad to shoot, Bannister wanted 24. So it was a massive intensification. There was a fashion for this intensification in grouse moors in that period. And Bannister read the books and found out how you could intensify more. You need obviously far more heather, so you need it drier, so there's more heather, so you've got to drain it. You need that heather to turn over quicker, so you have to burn that heather. If you're going to support 12 times the number of grouse, you mustn't underestimate how valuable grouse are. We see them, and we're quite bored by them. They are £3,000 a pair. That's how you value a grouse. Count the grouse, divide by 2 to get a brace, and multiply by 3,000. And when you're walking about on the moor, and you come across a bit of kit, like one of those grit bins, those little grit bricks, or something to drink, grass, to drink out of, that's for one pair. So that the pair, that's their kit on the moor. But £3,000 a pair. So the people in Hebden Bridge who were flooded, you know the dates better than I do, certainly flooded in 2015, and then twice again since then, in a big way, I think correctly thought that the new regime on Walshaw Moor had increased the runoff rate of the moor, so that you get a bigger peak, and that peak flooded Hebden Bridge 3 times. And that's a very plausible theory. Myself, I think it's correct. And the mechanism is, if you burn the heather, then you reduce the friction, the surface friction of the water. It's sort of wrong to say that peat is a sponge, because the way it ought to be is a full sponge, like the sponge in your bath. And if it's full of water, then it can't take any more water, so its surface becomes a perfectly fast surface for the water to travel over. So peat as a sponge isn't quite the right idea, but the way that the peat is being messed up, drainage channels are being cut or so on, and the fact that the vegetation isn't slowing the water surface flow down enough, probably does explain that. It's very hard to pin. I'm not going to pin it on, but it seems likely. Those tracks are the ones west of Grief Clough. So Lord Savile's track is on the left, and that's the same place after Bannister's bulldozers made it bigger in 2002. So he did a lot very quickly on that. And then there was an agreement between Natural England and the Walshaw estate that he would gradually, or the estate would gradually return the moor to more like it had been when he started in 2002. I don't know what muscle they used to make him sign that in the end. And partly we pay for it, so we give him money to do what he's been asked to do. We pay for the grip blocking, for example. So those little dams in the drainage, we pay for those. And we always have money in the subsidies of various kinds. But the fact is that the moor will be restored. It's not happening very fast at the moment, but left as it is, by 2042, and if Natural England really pay attention, and there's more chance of them doing that now than there was before in a way, then they will fix the things that Bannister has done, and it will be better than it is now. So the new owners, they have to beat that level of target, and their target has to be a bit better than that. Probably what they're going to say is we'll do it faster, because they've got all the machinery up there to do it. So they will do the peat work that is being required by Natural England, and required by us, and which we are paying for. They will do it probably quicker than Bannister would do it. So it will end up a bit better, a bit sooner. What does this mean for right here? So this was the only real surprise for me, in Calderdale Energy Park's brochure, is this second access. Because there is a workable access at Cog Hill. You can get an 85-metre turbine blade to Cog Hill via Ovenden Wind Farm, and without doing all that much in the way of roadworks. So the roadworks you have to do, you can see what you have to do. Just before, so about a month before this thing came out, I finally proved you couldn't use the Widdup Road, that narrow road that goes across Widdup Reservoir. That was never a starter for an access road. But I was convinced that they could get the thing up. It's not, it's not obvious you can build a Widdup farm up there, but you can do it that way. These people always have to have options, and the reason they have options is so they can divide and rule the opposition. So now the people in Conan Lancashire Bridge are saying, well, we've got all this stuff coming past us now, and we're very angry. The people in Halifax are quite passive so far. It's quite difficult. We must go over them and try and get them more interested than they are, because they've got the same problem as Cone and Major Bridge have. In some ways, more of a problem because it's more obviously a way in. What's different about this, of course, is it's banister road. So that one of the things Donald Mackay said to me, I said to him, "Do you really believe in option B?" I said to him, and then he said, "I'm a pretty transparent guy," he said, this consultant. "I'm a pretty transparent guy, and yes, I do believe in option B." I don't know about you, I don't really altogether believe in option B. There's a lot to do in roadworks on the Two Laws Road before you get to that turn. All of us think that bridge can't take it by the Emmerdales, the turn into. I think we all probably also think that the turning circle there won't allow an 85-metre grade. It's very difficult to do that analysis. I mean, I did it for Oxenope and for Hebden Bridge to show that you couldn't get blades up there. That was easy because it's all close in there. The buildings are close in. It's not an easy thing to do, even for the experts. So I don't know whether you can do that turn there. But suddenly now, you're properly in the firing line. But really, everyone in Cone and Trawden and Lancashire Bridge ought to have felt that they were always in the firing line, because their wonderful moor, which is partly kind of our job to look after, is going to be trashed by this wind farm. Now, the locals don't really matter in the planning. So, our local objections, we don't like how it looks, we don't like all this traffic, those will count for nothing, literally nothing. And so, if you want to save this more, you have to focus on the arguments that probably will count. And these are the international arguments, and then one more to do with flooding, which will come to. So this is Column of Halifax. This is a local company. They're very, very good at it, and that is a short blade. That's only 65 metres long. So these are going to be 85 metres long, another 20 metres. But you can see what they can do. So there's a blue spar that joins the front to the back, which is just above the level of the road. So that can go over the verge, and then of course the thing that's hanging off the back can oversail as much as it likes because it's quite high. And that is a difficult bend. That's quite a narrow road. It's not dissimilar to the Two Laws Road from Lancashire Bridge to Stanbury, except that road has got a lot of banks either side, and there are trees as well. I think this is Ireland. But they can perform miracles. These collars at Halifax. There's a convoy. So they obviously go in threes because the three arrive. And what will also come is these are the spectacular things. The other heavy thing is the nacelle, the thing on the top with all the generating, the generator. So that's 300 tons. These aren't heavy, but they're awkward. And then so between the length of that and the weight of that nacelle, those are the things that determine whether you have access. You can get the pylons in, the pylon sections. They're a bit easier, but they're easier than the nacelle. And then they go through places like Cone. If there's a white line down the middle of the road, it's wide enough. If it's straight enough, it's wide enough. If there's no white line, it isn't wide enough. On the Two Laws Road, there has been a white line at times, and you can see this. But I don't think it's really a white line. The reason it isn't there now is it's not actually wide enough for two lanes. So that road will often, where there is presently a white line, it is now already wide enough for all this, if it's straight enough. Okay, that spectacular thing will be in Cone and Lancashire Bridge, in Trawden, will be extremely annoying for a kind of a whole day while it happens. But it won't happen very much. It will only happen 41 times. And the first time it happens, people will enjoy it. They'll go out there with their mobile phones and they'll film it, and it will be spectacular, and so on. And then by about the fourth or fifth one, people will be becoming annoyed by it. But this is not really the problem. So although it's the problem for designing the route, it's not the traffic problem. The traffic problem on Walshaw Moor is caused by the fact that the local aggregates are no good for construction. And I have been saying that, I said that first of all about 395 days ago to the developers. And I asked that question in various different ways. I got more to ask the question when they told me they weren't going to answer my question, because I tended to call them Muttley. Muttley was my name for the way they behaved. And they said, you called us Muttleys, we're not going to answer your question. So I got more to ask the question. They didn't answer him either. He was certainly answering. You know, House of Commons no paper. He said they always answer, and they didn't. I went to the Oxenhope public exhibition and asked Alison Sidgwick, who signed off the original 65 turbine thing, and I said, did you look at the geology map before you signed it off? And she said, senior wind farm consultants do not need to consult geology maps. That's what she said. And she was quite angry. She was sort of angry with the idea that I thought that was, yeah. And then, anyway, I told her where to look now. So these aggregate assessments, that's one of them there, they come out every year. Look at the aggregate assessments and look at the BGS map, and it will tell you on the writing down the side of the map what is wrong with the aggregates up on that one. So 4 days later, at the one that's at the webinar that was broadcast, that Scotsman, he's from Lewis, Donald Mackay, Lydia typed the question in, Kevin asked the question, Donald Mackay said, yes, well the local aggregates are not good for construction, so essentially admitted the point. So you can't build the wind farm with the on-site aggregates. Often in Scotland you do. You get to the first bit of quarry, you quarry it, and then you can build the wind farm a bit further, get to another one, and carry on in that way. So they don't import hardly any stone. Here, the surface stone that we all see will be something like granite, like railway ballast, like the ballast under the rails. Very hard stone. That's what they use at Uffington Moor. And so it will be granite. It will come possibly from Loch Linney in Scotland on a ship, and then on maybe a train, and then on a truck, or it will come from Shap. There's a little granite quarry at Shap. That'll probably come all the way on the trucks, and it might come from Leicestershire. There's one called Mount Sorrel, where it's a kind of pink granite. That pink granite will look the worst of all. It will look pink when it's down. So they can't use limestone. So the estate do not use limestone on their tracks. Limestone is more available. It's in North Yorkshire. You build roads out of limestone, but they are not allowed to use limestone because limestone will be a bog poison. So it will kill the sphagnum slowly. The concrete, by the way, will kill the moss in about 300 years. So the concrete is a time bomb for our great-great-great-great-grandchildren. Eventually the membrane will fail, the iron will react with the cement, that will make iron sulfate, which is a moss killer. So eventually this wind farm will kill the bog. But if they use granite to build it, and what Don Mackay calls bulk fill, which is local aggregate, which you use to fill the trench a bit before the quite deep to a 40 centimetre running surface. So it's 900,000 tonnes of rock that you need. That's if they build the whole thing. We'll come to that. That's maximum. We can only deal with the one that's in front of us, can't we? We're talking to them about it. It's no use them saying, don't worry, it will be smaller. All we can do is deal with what's in front of us. So what's in front of us is sort of 900,000 tonnes. And Donald Mackay says it's a large amount of stone, is the way he put it, and that it's a lot of traffic at the end. And I think it may be that they've only been forced to wake up to this because I was rude to Alison Sidgwick, and she said, we better get on with this now, because this man's banging on about it. Because they solve their problems one at a time. So at the moment, they've been solving a whole different set of problems. So when Alison Sidgwick says, we don't look at geology maps at the moment, she's speaking sort of the truth. It's a kind of just-in-time way of planning the thing. That's what we're faced with. So the reason you don't get answers to your questions is it's true that they haven't thought about it. Because That's not the way they do it. They call it iteration, and they move from one thing that doesn't work to another thing that doesn't work, and it works. It's a bit better. So we haven't seen a proposal yet. That's a rigid. So that will carry. That's a sort of a 20 ton. So it's 45,000 of that is potentially. And there's an articulation, which I don't think we'll use actually. Now, part of the problem with both accesses is that it's fine to drive that sort of big nacelle down along the white line, but two of these have to pass, because there's going to be like a lot. You know, it could be sort of 50 a day. So they're going to have to pass on the 2 Lords Road. And that's the traffic that you would be rightly afraid of and furious about. That's a lot of traffic. It's a very, very great increase in the traffic on that 2 Lords Road and round here. When they've decided on the access, it will, I mean, if it's on this side, it can only come through Conan and Trawden. It really can't come from Stanbury, because the Stanbury end of that road, well, you know, is just a different order of difficulty even from this side. And that's where it will go in, so that you've seen that. That's a banister entrance to the peat house. I went up there with the dog a couple of days ago to assess this mysterious way in. That's an aggregate track, of course. The estate doesn't use limestone, that's not a limestone track, it's something that works to support a Land Rover, and it won't be, the running surface won't be deep. So, the people we're dealing with, they're sort of just in time. It is sort of incompetent. To people common sense like us, the way they carry on feels incompetent. To them it feels competent, because they solve the problems they've got to solve now. They don't solve the problems they don't have to solve. That's their process. So I've taken what's in the brochure, the zigzags across the moorland in Access B, and put it on a proper base map, so that you can see the kind of steepness. And you can't see that in the brochure, because the base map is a free one. It's not even as good as Google Maps. So that's the OS there. And this is difficult here. Another point to it now. So they're going to have to round that off. It's all going to come in. That's going to be a thing there. And then you get on that existing track, more or less as far as the peat house, which is there, and then it's there. So there's a little bit of track coming in there as well. So that bit's easy, and then it immediately is quite difficult this way. But you can see that that's a natural way up. So if you're going to walk up this hill, as I did, I walked up with the grouse butts on. It's a little bit steep at the beginning, but I know that if I can walk up without stopping and getting out of breath, then a turbine can go up that way. And I also think if I'm going down, I think, yeah, for my cross-country skis, could I ski down here? I can't ski down here. The turbine can't go down either. It's too steep. 10% is the kind of official figure, especially for a spine road, which this is. So everything has to come that way. So sometimes you get little spurs, and they might be a tiny bit steeper. So the steepest spur on Scoutmoor is 12%. The rest of it is sort of 9%. And at the beginning of Scoutmoor, you've got some pretty grinding hairpins, but they're not, they're only 10%. So this weird moorland track kind of almost seeks out that immensely steep section there. I mean, that's really steep, but that's a kind of standard moorland edge, and you find them all over the moor. And that is 21%. So you cannot drive a nacelle up there. You just can't. And so they've avoided, this is 15%, but not much room for manoeuvre. So if you come straight at it here, then you are basically forced into 15%, because there's not enough room to do a zig and a zag. This clough, Nanhole Clough, is a pretty serious thing. So that I couldn't cross it with the dog there, and then I couldn't have crossed it. I didn't want to, but I couldn't have crossed it, to about here. It's a serious obstacle, that one. The obvious way up is up the grass bars. I wonder if Bannister said to them, yeah, you can use that, I'll sell it to you, but you're not coming up my grass bars. You're not going to come direct. So, but they cannot come that way. So they're going to have to wiggle about much more than they have to try and get round to try and find these, this less steep bit. So you can get it down to 12%. I have drawn all these. You can get it down to 12%. What I don't know is what the peat's like. So if it's peaty, you cannot traverse. You can't go sideways. I only measured the peat there, and it was 130 there, which is too much. So if it's 130 there, then you can't traverse. So that's part of the reason why you do go straight at it. So if it's steep and it's peaty, you have to go straight at it. You can't go sideways. So in a way, that's kind of like a quad bike track or something. Though in fact, the quad bikes do go that at the moment. But a quad bike doesn't mind 21%. And you see them zipping up, things which are very steep. So Lydia said, don't tell them they can't get in that way, because then they'll go home and say, no problem, this isn't coming this way. At the moment, there's a lot to do with that zigzag. Yeah? This has been a rush job that was constructed on the 10th of March, that map. Their meeting was on the 21st of February. You can work all this out from the codes on the maps. So when Christian Eagle, who's project director, arrived in February, he arrived, found a mess, had a meeting, said, come on, he gets momentum together, and they got on with this wind farm. So things have been done in a rush. That's a rush job, straightforward. And then that will be interesting in legal terms. I'll tell you about that later. So that's my Airedale. At the last grass band. Once you're at that last grass band, you are up. I mean, you can go anywhere now. You're up. There. So, many of us have been to these so-called consultations and been told things like that. So when obviously I've spoken with them at length about what's wrong with the wind farm. And they say to me patiently, but it's not really a wind farm, it's a snapshot of the process. So that we're not being asked to consider a wind farm, we're being asked to consider their weird layout, 2102, 25, 41T, 41 turbines. We have not been consulted on a wind farm, we've been consulted on a process. There's loads wrong with it. So what has happened is they have started with what they had before, which had 65 turbines. If you come off the peat, the obviously deep peat, and try to build a wind farm avoiding the deep peat, then you could, under the previous turbine size, you could only get to 170 megawatts. And Christopher Wilson famously said, it's not economic below 200 megawatts. Christopher Wilson is the executive chairman of Calderdale Wind Farm Limited. So he's the original bright spark who spoke to Richard Bannister and said, I think we can build a wind farm. And then he has found he's found the money. He doesn't understand anything about electricity or wind farms. He's astonishingly ignorant about all this. But he understands that sort of public school way with rich people. So there's loads wrong with this wind farm. So that's T21, and many of you will notice how close that is to the Pennine Way. So that's 57 metres. So the blades in the right wind direction, which is all the time actually, the southwest wind. In the southwest wind, those blades will overhang the whole of the Pennine Way. And that's a completely pointless mistake. There is no way that will be allowed. They don't want to do it themselves. But at this point in their process, they don't care about that kind of thing. They've got a kind of deliberate attitude that we solve the problems we have to solve right now. And the problem that we're solving is the peak. That is a completely inaccessible turbine down there. So that wasn't there before in the 65. That was not a turbine location when there were 65 turbines. Because you simply can't get down there, it's too steep. It's 26%. It's even steeper than those zigzags. So that's just a completely nonsense turbine. And that's happened, and it's kind of fallen off. In the rush to get off this peak, this deep peak, lovely deep peak, in the rush to get off that peak, some of them have just got to the edge and fallen over into the clough. You know, that's more or less what's happened there. So this whole layout has only had kind of one criterion, one input criterion, which was to get that, which was the 65 turbine wind farm, to get that off the deep peak. So this had mad turbine placements. That's mad. And then up here was bonkers. There's one on here. That's completely bonkers. There's no reason for it to be on the yellow. It could easily be on the green. And so all over it is just completely bonkers. Donald Mackay said, I said to him, it wasn't very good, but he said, it was worse than useless, Donald Mackay said, of that wind farm. That, of course, is the wind farm that, for Pete's sake and Stronger Together, and all of us have been campaigning against for a long time. And it was a patently rubbish wind farm. You know, it was easy to campaign against that wind farm because it's stupid all over the place. And then, as soon as you make it stupid, it gets too small, it ends up on the green, it gets too small, it's not economic, it's a long way to Rochdale to connect it. And so, the only way to salvage the position was bigger turbines. So, the idea now is bigger turbines on the dark green. That's essentially the way the thing will pan out there. So now, more or less, the turbines are not on the deep peak. You know that that's not enough because the roads count too. In fact, the roads really count more than the turbine size. So obviously you dig up a big hole and there's all that peat and you've wrecked it, and it isn't really peat anymore, it's waste. It's carbon, but it's waste. And then you could dump it somewhere, but it won't turn back into a peat ball. It'll wash away in time. It hasn't got any structure. But you know, they've reduced that because now the holes will reach the boulder clay quite quickly, off through sort of 50 centimetre peat mostly. The roads are still a problem because the main effect on the peat is the drying effect around the infrastructure, and most of the infrastructure is tracks. So even they say 50 metre buffer either side of the track. So we accept that 50 metres either side is gone, the peak goes in time. Many of you and I as well think it's much more than 50 metres in certain situations. I mean, it depends. So it just isn't even like 1 metre there, because there isn't any peak. There's essentially zero peak in this area. So if you said I want a 50 metre buffer, they'd say, well, why? Because it's grass and then pebbles. But if you have it here, then probably 300 or 400 metres would be a reasonable buffer. So it's not straightforward. So that wind farm, that layout, is not a wind farm because that wind farm doesn't work. That layout, all that's happened is they've tried to reduce the amount of peat that gets dug up. So that's their answer to what we call the peat problem. And now everything after that solves the rest of the problems. So some subset of that 41 turbines is the final wind farm. When they start to look at the other problems, they probably will row back slightly on peat. So when it comes to it, they'll say, well, we've run out of room here, so I'm going to move that back onto a slightly deeper peat, and so on. But as far as the peat is concerned, that's it. And I think we should believe them when they say, we are going to restore active blanket bog there, and there. They don't have to here, because all by itself, that's an active blanket bog in there. And all the dog walkers now have to walk around it. He's eaten the path, he's eaten the signs. It's a terrific, the best bog on the moor is right there. No turbine there. They will, yeah. And then we come to this area over here, which is, we'll come to in a minute. So our case, so I run a group. So the people who walk with me on the blogs, we now call ourselves, because we have to have a name for taking legal action, we call ourselves the Walshaw Turbine Research Group. And we are in dialogue now with their lawyers. So our lawyers, plural, because we have more than one, he has friends who are very expert. When we sent the first letter, his London friend said they will not reply, they will simply ignore you. And our lawyer friend said, Maybe they will argue with us. I hope they argue with us. Now we're now in argument. So the more they argue, the more record there is of their knowing now what the problem is with that consultation. There are straightforward rules, and you've probably heard about them, for the way you run a public consultation. And this was one of those, because it was a consultation and we were invited. That is a public consultation. They call it a non-statutory consultation, and that non-statutory does not protect them from gunning, from the gunning principles. The gunning principles are that if a member of the public comes to a public consultation, they should be able to give the proposal intelligent consideration. That's the test. Could the people who came give it intelligent consideration? And most of us who came to that thing would say, we couldn't give it any consideration at all, intelligent or otherwise, because it was not a proposal. That it's not a wind farm. It's full of mistakes. We've listed all those mistakes as well. So, we say, even the developers couldn't give their wind farm intelligent consideration because it isn't really a wind farm. All it is a stage in a process. It's all admitted, and if they don't sort this out, then it will bite them in the arse in about 6 months' time. Because the planning inspector will say, we've got lots of complaints, you didn't follow gunning. And they'll say, well, we have been dealing with something else. It shows the dialogue, and they will have to show them the letters, and then the planning inspector will say, no, you didn't do this right, did you? So it will bite them in the end. They're going to have to do something about it. They can't just ignore it. And they're not going to ignore it. The lawyers are told, and they're big London lawyers called Vincent Mason. So at the moment we're dealing with a junior. Clearly the junior does the cut and paste. But they're run by Vincent Mason. Vincent Mason wrote the book on gunning. And they will be saying to Chrissy Legal, actually, they've got you here on gunning. You're in trouble on gunning. You can read all these letters, they're on our website. Okay, so you're kind of local, you're absolutely justified to be furious about this wind farm if you don't care about the law, all you care about is the traffic. That's completely justified. But it won't have any effect. And you can go out and lie in front of these stone walls and it won't have any effect. So if you want to fight the wind farm, you kind of have to get behind the campaigns, and the campaigns are aiming at the things that will work, that might work. Because experts in wind farms have told us, don't get too involved in this campaign, because Ed Miliband can put a tick in a box and pass his wind farm, no matter how bad the planning inspectorate say it is. Now, he then faces judicial review, and he will face judicial review. There will be a lot of bodies willing to club together, the RSPB and so on, like Wild Justice, us, will chip in, and the judge might say to Ed Miliband, look, it's illegal here, here, and here. They didn't follow gun. All those things then come out in the wash. Now, we don't want it to go that far, because judicial review has a very bad reputation now among the British public. They say the lawyers are running the country, the government should run the country. And that's sort of true. But the government does have to follow the law, and if they're not following the law, and a single minister is able to wade through an illegal wind farm, then all we can do is judicial review. It's not our fault. They've done their rhetoric, haven't they? That bat tunnel, all that stuff. Oh, there's newts. They're complaining about newts, they'll say of us. They're NIMBYs. Well, we're not actually, because the things we're using to fight the wind farm are the international reasons why there should not be a wind farm on Walshaw Moor. There are two international reasons. So our local concerns actually don't count. All we can do is work on the international reasons for our own children's sake why there should not be a wind farm on Walshaw Moor. It just isn't NIMBY. You can hardly see this wind farm. You won't see it from Cope. It's screened by Walshaw. People in Peckett Well can see it. They get an eye. We live really close to it. We'll hardly see it. We're so close to it, we'll hardly see it. Once they've done a bit more, it's not a visual problem. It's a problem for the nature and for the heritage of that moor, which is very extraordinary in both ways. Flooding, however, is a very important, totally local issue, because only the locality gets flooded. And I don't think we do get flooded in Trawden. I'm not sure, but they definitely get flooded in Hampton Bridge. I mean, over in Haworth, no one's worried about the flooding from this wind farm. but people are right to be worried about flooding from this wind farm. And the way it's laid out will cause a flood, but absolutely straightforward way. So this is like a standard, like an American big wind farm. So they're laid out in rows, and they're facing the southwest wind. So that is an attempt to make like a normal wind farm. They stand in rows and they're right distance apart, all good. This is west of Grieve Clough. That's Grieve Clough there, and this is a sort of 10% slope. So I can walk up it, I can ski down it. There's a piece of cover in my cross-country skis, and so it's quite steep. So these tracks over this peat, they simply can't zigzag up there. They have to go straight up, and I confirmed that with Donald McKinnon. I said to him, I can't draw a network west of Grieve Clough. I can draw a network everywhere else. You can join the dots, and, but I can't do it west of Grieve Clough. I can't make a correct, safe network. And he said to me, what do you mean? So I said, well, look, first of all, I pointed to that turbine. There was a turbine there, T38, in between 37 and 39, until quite later in the planning, and they moved it. And then Alison Sidgwick, who's somebody lied to me about that at Oxenhope, Donald McKay said, laugh. He said, ha, of course we moved it, he said. It's on the Blackburn and Peak survey, so we moved it. But you can see it fits in with the pattern of that grid. So you've got to go straight up that peak, absolutely straight up, direct at the contours. It's not too steep, it's 10%, pretty much. But what you've made, when you've accessed this bit, you've made all these drains. These are drains now, and the water will flow down the road and down the drains either side of the track. And then that all funnels it to Grieve Clough, which can be a raging torrent even now, partly because of Bannister's misuse of the moor. And then Grieve Clough, as some of you will know, but none of the developers know, absolutely none of them knew, that all this is collected in a sluice here. It's a terrifying place in the winter. There's a sluice and a tunnel to the right, and then all the water from that catchment goes into Widder Reservoir, which normally it would miss. So normally it would go straight to Headland Bridge. So it's all intercepted up to a point, and that tunnel can be overwhelmed because it's too much water at the sluice, and then the water goes over the sluice as designed and down the spillway and goes straight to Headland Bridge. So in a once-in-a-decade storm, the way all that works is completely different to normal. In a once-in-a-decade storm, a tunnel full of water still goes that way, and then another tunnel full of water goes straight to Headland Bridge. And that water still goes to Headland Bridge because it reaches the reservoir's full, and it goes over the spillway. It just goes a little slower, more roundabout route. So these are storm drains. They're also bog drains. So in normal times they drain the bog, and then in storm times they are a storm drain. So there is no way that any of that's happening. So that is all dummy turbines. And when they get to it, they'll acknowledge that. Because we know that they want high 20s of turbines, not 40. 41 is not, they've got the number in mind, and it's high 20s. One of our jobs is to get to low 20s. Get to low 20s, and they can't build the wind farm. So it's quite tight. So 66 megawatts just goes over there for flooding. And then, of course, the rest of the wind farm will also accelerate the runoff, but not in such an obvious way as that. That is an accident waiting to happen there. So that will not happen. Bannister here, it wasn't just Bannister. One of those Bannister kind of tracks is that kind of very deep peat gully. You just walking up here. One of the things that they might say they'll do is we will fill up that peat gully with peat from elsewhere. We'll put it in that, and that will help restore that scar and that drainage line. I don't think that will work. That peat won't stay. I mean, it's turned into a drainage line already. That's the Grieve Clough sluice. Looking as of November, looking not too frightening. I thought to myself, I might swim in that not too bad a day, freezing cold. That's the tunnel. That's it. This bore is quite small, so it's quite easy to overwhelm that tunnel. It goes over there and then down the small. They spent £33,000 on site visits. No one has visited the grief offices. It's not on the hydrology map. They don't know about it. And that's where they work. They don't know about it. It doesn't matter at the moment. Right. So the flooding will. I mean, the flooding argument will happen. Do things about it. It's mitigatable. In other words, that's the way they proceed. What they think they've done is they've already mitigated the peat. So they think they've done the peat, and they're very, very confident about that. Donald Mackay, he said, well, 15 years ago we were gung-ho with peat. We used to go through 12 metres of peat, 12 metre depth peat. Alison said, oh yeah, we've got windfall on 8 metre deep peat. See, these Scottish consultants do not think it's very peaty out there. They don't think it's peaty. They think it's easy. That's their attitude. You need to work out what their attitude is. Their attitude is it's not all that peaty, but we fixed the peat for them. We've got the turbines off the deep peat. We've done that. By the way, there's absolutely no point moaning about the carbon dioxide of this windfarm. Before, it was marginal. Now, it is not. There is no way that it's anywhere near the grid mix. So it is way less than the grid mix. So it's no use saying to them, what about the carbon dioxide from the lorries? Because that is a flea bite in that calculation. It's a tiny. What about the steel to make the turbines? It's tiny. The only things that matter in that carbon calculation are excavating very deep like Bronze Age peat, or and the entrance. Those are the two things in that balance. All the rest of it is undoings in the carbon calculation. So it's quite easy to do the carbon calculation. You get 95% of the way to the carbon calculation just by thinking about how much peat have you buggered in building this thing. Count the kilometres of track, count the turbine sites. You can do it quite quickly. Like in an afternoon, you can get 95% of the way. And the fact is, so if you say to them, we're very worried about the carbon dioxide from your operation, they'll just laugh at you. They're laughing inside. They know they've got that completely sewn up, as every other wind farm has been. And there's nothing we can do about that. So, the grid mix is the grid mix. And the one they're allowed to use is something like 183. 183. After decarbonisation, it's meant to be 20. And we will say, well, in that case, this ought to be 20 because it's going to be there after decarbonisation, and so it should be the same as the other ones.
What's the grid mix?
The grid mix is how much fossil fuel there is in the recipients. So it varies all day. You can look it up, you can look at it instantaneously. So when it's not windy, there's loads of fossil fuel, it's maybe 300. When it's very windy, there's less fossil fuel, the more renewables, it goes down. The average is 183. That's the number they're allowed to use. And you're comparing that 183 with a number that's probably about 20 or 30 for the peat. The peat carbon is undeniably going to be released, and everything else is going to come in at about 20 or 30. And then some bits and pieces which are not relevant. So CO2 is not an argument. So it's no point, whenever you talk about CO2 now, you're doing the developers' work for them. And they know that better than we do. So the strong argument, and it's a strong peat argument because peat is part of that SAC. The very strong arguments, and they're international, are that this is designated up to the eyeballs with law. It has been for absolutely ages, and that law is part of European law, and when we did Brexit, we carried this European law into our own law. So it's all still there. And then it's even deeper than that. So that should have been enough. We think it might not be. That's what we really fear. If we thought that law was going to work, we wouldn't be here. We'd be sitting at home drinking our cocktails saying, ha ha ha, they cannot build a wind farm on Walshaw because you can't overtake those two designations. But we suspect that they might be able to fiddle it, especially with help from government. The best thing though is that in 2022 at COP26, see, the climate crisis is about two things. It's about all the nature dying and about carbon dioxide. And the nature goes first. so that our children will live in a grossly nature-depleted world because of climate change. It will have an effect on the nature. But they're going to accelerate that on Walshaw Moor. So they're going to take something that is wonderful and turn it into something that is completely sterile, called a park. And in 2022, we led, the UK led what's called the Kunming-Montreal Protocol. So Kunming was in China and fell in during the pandemic, and then so they finished it off in Montreal. That's why it has that double barrel name. We've agreed to a number of things, but the most famous thing that we have agreed with and got everybody else to follow us, so we led this because David Attenborough probably asked for it, to come and do this. 30% of all the territories on Earth are set aside for nature, properly set aside, area-based, so you can't have 3 feet of square metre of their own space, but proper, continuous areas, properly managed for conservation. 30%. And then the problem for England especially, is nature is evolved. The problem for England is we can't get to 30%. It's really, really hard. Most countries can get there easily. The Vatican can get there. Because they didn't want to sign it. Until someone said, you're okay. Because literally, the Pope's back is 45% of the thing. And they said, well, you can run that for nature. And then you've done it. So they signed it. There was the Democratic Republic of Congo didn't want to sign. And then afterwards they said, well, we didn't sign it. But basically, everybody, apart from the Americans, it was Biden. And even he said, we will do all those things, because they don't want to sign the protocol. So everyone's going to do it. The weak country in that thing is us. We are it. DEFRA have a plan. So this is an absolutely government plan that's been in planning since 2022. And their plan is that the red areas, which are the SPAs and the SACs, these are going to be the core of what's going to be 30%. And the reason they call that